Got it.
Welcome to the Weather Insights Podcast. I'm meteorologist Scott Pitney along with meteorologist Jeff Lindner. Jeff, good evening, sir.
Hi, good evening.
How was your Labor Day weekend?
It was good.
Yeah.
There was a lot of things going on.
Yeah, did you stay in the AC mostly or?
No, well, yes, and then we were outside. We did a little grilling, smoking of meat, and yeah,
Yeah, I actually saw your post.
Yeah.
That looked very tasty.
yeah, good ribs.
Looked like you were poolside too.
We were, yes, and yeah, and everything that goes with it.
Yeah, well, excellent. Well, we'd like to welcome our very special guest tonight, Mr. Bill Reed, the former director of the National Hurricane Center. Mr. Reed, welcome to Weather Insights, sir. How are you doing?
Thank you. Doing fine. When you get up to a 74 every morning, there's a quick look out the window to prove that you're still on the green side of the sod. I am.
That is a good thing. That is a good thing. So I know you're in the south part of Houston area there. What has your rainfall been for the month of September so far down there? Have you kept track of it?
Yeah, I actually got 45 hundredths of an inch 2 days ago out of one of those showers. That was my second measurable rain since July 4th.
Well, that's not too bad. That's almost my total for the whole month of August here in Spring Branch was 0.48. So far September I'm at 0.28. Hopefully we'll maybe get some do some catch up next week. You know, the rain chances are looking better, but more. I think what people are looking forward more to is the cooler air. You know, which for us is 90s. You know, just getting out of the triple digits.
Yeah.
I haven't had a lot of rain, so I think I beat both of you. I think I've had 0.
Well, Bill, I don't know if you know this about Jeff, but would surprise you to know that he does not have a rain gauge at his house.
I don't need one either. I've got 3 of the flood control district gauges within a mile of my house, and I can just average the 3, and it comes out usually very close to what my own is. But it's not nearly as much of an adventure as I had during Harvey, running out at a 6-inch-an-hour rain rate as it's just getting ready to overtop the 10-inch gauge, run it back in, pour it in a bucket, bring the gauge back out and measure it.
And how many times did you have to do that, you think? Maybe 4?
I did it twice on the Saturday night rain. I had 26 inches fall overnight, 16 of which was in really just about 3 hours. That was incredible.
Wow, yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that the Cocoa Rust gauge you got?
Yeah.
Yeah. I used to do that, I used to do it, and then I got, doing it every day, I just, I kind of gave up.
Yeah, we don't, again, we got so many automated type readings around here. We really don't need much denser than it is. Though the showers like the other day, I'm sure that the 3 gauges nearest mine had totally different amounts that I did.
Oh, yeah.
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 Yeah, I think the closest Harris County gauge to me is what is that one over there? Maybe a half a mile.
Yeah, Spring Branch at Bingle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that creek over there. So and I'm just within a few hundredths of that one. So that's what I use to calibrate mine.
Well, I'm glad that the Harris County gauges are doing such a great work for y'all.
I applaud you.
It's putting the rain gauge manufacturers that make the ones you put in your backyard out of business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, those are handy too. I mean,
Especially-
you don't want to, do all this, like I had to set mine up and make it level and all this stuff. And that, that's not my thing, but I got it done anyway. And now I got to change the batteries and all this stuff with that. I don't really care for that too much.
Yeah, that's a whole other podcast on the accuracy of those.
And I don't even know why. I mean, you've seen my backyard. I've got artificial turf. Why do I even care?
Yeah, the first job I had coming out of grad school was at the test and evaluation lab that the Weather Service has out at Dulles. And one of the I wasn't in this project, but one of the big projects was trying to calibrate what actually is the correct measurement of rain. It was before the automated surface observing system came in, and they were trying to decide which automated rain gauge to go with for that. And it was pretty scary how wide a range you got with the various kinds of gauges that some people were selling for a lot of money.
Really? What was the variance on some of? Do you remember what the variance was? Was it?
I think in percentage wise, the range was somewhere around 30%.
Oh my goodness.
It's too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We calibrated a few for Harvey that possibly were the record, and we went out and calibrated, and they came off. They were over 50% off, so they were thrown out pretty quick. So yeah, some of those ones you buy are just, I don't know. They're either they come uncalibrated or they get uncalibrated over time, or I don't know. But they're pretty rough.
Yeah. Well, I just don't like changing the batteries.
Well, that's why I have you know, it's strictly manual labor. If I don't go out and dump it, I've lost a day of the measurement.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with Bill's lead and just have that. And when the batteries go out, I'll always have that manual one.
I get about 20 years out of one in this climate before the plastic starts failing and you can't read through it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got mine set up now on the back porch on a lower fence. It's probably not. Actually, I think it's still a good site, but I can actually read it from my porch without getting soaking wet now while it's raining.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. That's a nice thing. So how's your grass doing? Have you given up on it, or are you keeping it?
Well, it bothers people when I tell them this, but my highest water bill was last month, $57. I don't water it is basically it. In 2011, League City in April banned lawn watering. And I was still over at NHC then, and my son was living in our house. And by midsummer, he was telling me that, Dad, the lawn is dead. There's not even a weed growing right now. And I said, well, I'll just don't worry about it. When I retire, we'll resod it. It'll be fine, you know. And retired. It was a year later, and it was nothing but weeds in the backyard. And started raining again really in 2013. And by the end of 2013, my yard looked just as good as neighbors on either side that were paying those lawn services all that money to fertilize and watering the hell out of it. I can't imagine what water bills are for people that really are trying to keep them green this year.
Yeah.
It's got to be crazy. It's got to be crazy.
Well, my lawn is about 1/3 St. Augustine, 1/3 Bermuda, and 1/3 weeds that I have no idea what they're is.
I'm sure it's beautiful.
The big dogs that crap in the backyard. You really don't need a fancy yard when you've got that situation.
Well, that Bermuda, if you shave it down enough, you can maybe make a putting or chipping green out of it.
You know, then I'd have to keep the St. Augustine out of it, and that would require work. And
Oh yeah, well, yeah, I don't want to do that. Just got a golf course.
Golf course is about a mile from the house, so
Yeah, that's the way to do it. Do you still play?
yeah. But two things: the heat. I don't enjoy it. The last round I played was mid-July, and I think I shot a 40 on the front nine, which I normally shoot about 45 on, and so soldiering on. And by the 12th hole, I was just so miserable. I said, "This isn't fun. I'm done." And
How were you playing on the back nine? Were you
I was still playing okay, but it was just like I could feel it wasn't dehydration. I've been dehydrated before, so I was drinking gallons of water while I was playing. But the early signs of heat exhaustion, I could feel it. And let's not be stupid, old man. Go home, have a beer, and go to sleep.
Yeah, definitely not worth it. Well, I'll take a 40. That's good.
Yeah, my goal is to eventually shoot my age. And, so the real trick is I've got to stay physically healthy until I'm in my 80s, because I haven't broken 80 now in about 6 years. In fact, right before Harvey, I shot a 73.
Whoa.
Yeah, my playing partners referred to it as an out of body experience. You know, who are you? What have you done with Bill Reed? Is what they were saying.
Sort of a numbing effect. Yeah, my dad, he shot his age 76 over there on the Bear Creek President's Course.
Wow.
And I had his scorecard framed with the ball and everything. It was a pretty special day for him.
Neil Frank still shoots his age. He's quite a golfer. I played with him back when he was still at KHOU, and at that time he was probably in his mid-60s, and it was a scramble, but they were basically playing his shot. And then next time I played with him, he didn't hit it very far anymore, but he was putting better than any of us, which is unusual when you get older. And last year when I talked to him, he had just finished shooting his age. He was 90 and he shot an 89.
Oh my goodness! Oh, he broke his age. That's incredible. Is he? I heard that he was a golf coach. I think where his grandson went to school or
Yes.
something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
coach.
Well, actually, he told me that the situation with the club I used to be a member of, they shut it down for 3 months to redo our greens. So we played over at Dr. Frank's course, and we were on the first tee box, and it was raining a little bit, and he comes rolling in. I said, "Well, if he's not playing, I'm not playing." He's got to know something we don't. So, but yeah, real nice man. Chatted with him a little bit, and yeah, that's when he was telling me that he was the coach over there where his grandson went to school. So, obviously, he plays a lot of golf. Well, that's good. You're still playing, Bill.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I still mess with the weather. I do a little bit of consulting with A&M Galveston on various things hurricane wise, but very little. It's stuff I'm mostly looking at anyway, so I'll just package it for their needs and send it off.
Have you been down there recently, Texas A&M Galveston?
No, I do it all. I do it all from home now. In fact,
Mhm.
you guys probably know him, Sam Brody. Yeah,
Yep.
he's done a lot of research in the same sort of stuff we're interested in, but they have this A&M has this Institute for Disaster Resilient Texas. An unfortunate choice of acronyms because we all started pronouncing it iDirt. Powers that be didn't like the dirt part, so they have to say the whole name. but he lives in like Bel Air, and they got a campus now out by the medical center. A&M does, and that's where he does most of his work on it. I do it all remote since
Yeah.
they had me set up for an office to go down there like one day a week, and COVID hit. And at that time, I was doing most of my work for Dr. Merrill. I think he went and fell and broke a couple of things, and I haven't heard from him much since then. I think he's basically in a I'm getting ready to retire mode because I've been dealing with Sam mostly now. But it's kind of good. It makes me keep up to speed with the changes that are being done in the hurricane program and the lessons learned from the various storms. I read the reports and condense it and things like that.
Yeah. The reason I asked, I hadn't been down to Galveston in a while. We were down there this past weekend and over at the Strand and looking across the water there, they had the USS Texas dry docked. And that was pretty cool seeing that. That's not something you see very often, but it was right there close to the A&M Marine campus.
Yeah, in theory, it'll have a home down there.
Mm.
That's the latest plan on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't realize after I saw it, I started reading some history on it. And the thing was, it's been around since 1914, so it's seen some action. I think it was over at Normandy. I caught that in the article I was reading. But yeah, that was pretty neat to see that. Speaking of Galveston, so we have the 123rd anniversary of the 1900 storm. See, this is the 6th, so in a couple of days. And I was watching the documentary, I think it's put out by National Geographic, and I hear this familiar voice, and I look up, and it's you.
I did a lot of around the 100th anniversary of it. I did a lot of the documentaries that people put together. And the Geographic one was fun. You know, they're very professional in how they produce those and whatnot. And
When was that? Was that done around 2006? Did I read that correctly? Or
yeah, I think so. There was the History Channel did the one that was done in 2000, and then I think it was the National Geographic, and there's been several The last one I did was shortly after I retired, a group out of Canada that does documentaries that is similar to National Geographic.
Yeah. Yeah. So that storm, I guess that documentary was based a lot on Eric Larson's book, um, Isaac Storm, and have you read the book, Bill? Have you read his book?
Oh, yes, many times.
I'm sure.
Uh,
So,
I actually like there's an earlier one I like better. I mean, it's a good book. It's got a lot of interesting stuff in it. The Weekend in September by Weems, it was done at the 50th anniversary, and many of the survivors were still alive. So he caught oral histories from them and converted that into separate chapters in the book. It was a fascinating read.
yeah, yeah. It's an interesting way, the way that Larson did it. Kind of, leaves the question whether Isaac Klein gave everybody enough warning or not, given what he had back then. I mean, which was not
That's
a
my
lot.
bone to pick. I think he was looking at warnings in the lens of today.
Mm,
What we did, our thing on NTWC today was about the 1900 storm, and I just put about a 10-slide slideshow together, and I start out with the track of the storm, and then I put a slide up. Here's when the storm's crossing the Atlantic from the Cape Verde Islands. Here's what forecasters had available to help their decision, and it's a black screen.
mm.
Nothing.
Right.
It crossed the islands as a tropical storm. It stayed right on the northern island chain, right across the big islands. And most of those had at least one weather observer on there set up by Venus there in Cuba, the Jesuit father who was absolutely a genius at observational weather. And a lot of the lore about that forecasting back then dates back to his stuff. But it's basically a persistence and climatology is what the forecasting was. Well, it was moving west-northwest across Cuba. So the last they knew of it, it was aimed at Texas, and they said it was going to Texas. And Larson and others have made a big deal about they forecasted correctly to go to Texas, and the U.S. Weather Bureau fumbled the ball having it go to Florida, and neither of them had a clue as to where it really was going to go because they didn't know where it was once it was out in the Gulf.
Yeah. Well, you just answered my next question, because I picked up on that too. Is like, how did anybody know anything? So,
I would think you'd have to, if to be a weatherman back then, you better not have suicidal tendencies.
yeah, I mean, you have a barometer and a few other things. That's about it.
Even if you could properly warn them on there, what would they do? They didn't have cars to jump in and drive across a 6-lane causeway to get the hell out of there. Train left, I think, once a day to get people to Houston.
Yeah, and, I think at that time there were 37,000 people on the island. And what was it was 8 feet above sea level at its highest point, something like that.
Yeah, maybe up to 9, just under that, but it doesn't matter. The storm surge, the official report has it at 15.7.
Yeah.
Everything.
So, yeah.
The thing that I've never gotten comfortable with the answer is why they thought they were immune to a disaster from storm surge. If you really want to dig into it, really dig into the 1875 and 1886 Indianola storms. That's over 100 miles from Galveston, and both those storms created about a 10-foot storm tide in Galveston.
Oh, I did not know that. Wow.
But it was sufficiently far enough away, I guess, that they didn't destroy the buildings. Or the buildings, most of them were built on a pier and beam. Maybe they were high enough up that most of them, the water went under them. But, you would think someone would put it, those storms are pretty far away. What if they'd come up over here? Because obviously they wiped out Indianola both times.
Do you remember what the storm surge was with Carla for Galveston?
I think it was 10 or 11.
Mm-hmm.
It was at 15 feet at the entrance to Clear Lake. We had a tide gauge there, and I think it got up above 17 feet in the ship channel somewhere.
Yeah, it did. I just looked at the Carla storm surge stuff because I was doing some high water marks. The Corps of Engineers took high water marks after Carla, and I think it was 17.1 in the ship channel and around 15 at the mouth of where Kima Seabrook is.
Yeah.
So obviously higher up in the bay, lower along the beachfront.
Yeah. So where are now that we have the seawall and it's been tested a few times, where are the most vulnerable areas along the upper Texas coast right now?
I would think the all of the Harris County along Galveston, the west side of Galveston Bay. I include Texas City because they're under the illusion their levee won't fail. And I remember the first time I heard a speech from a Corps of Engineers who was the guy, a general in charge of levees, and he said there's two kinds of levees. Those that have failed and those that will fail. None of them are built to be indestructible. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, but I think the whole stretch of the levee on the north side of Texas City is 15 feet above sea level.
Yeah, it's 15 feet, and then for Ike with wave, it got right to there might have been a little bit of overlap on that north side of the levee with Ike. It was right there, but that was with wave because the wind was coming out of the northeast against the levee. The wave action of the bay was angled toward the top of the northeast facing part of the levee. So you're right. I don't think people sometimes realize, just like in New Orleans, as we've seen, they reduce the risk, but they don't eliminate the risk.
Yeah. And was there any damage done to the levee during it?
There was some scour, but luckily the levee wasn't overtopped. So it was just the wave action breaking right around the top of it. So there was some scour, not unsimilar to what happened at Lake Conroe and Lake Livingston in Hurricane Rita, when they had the wind come across the lake and the wave action on the backside of the dam eroded into the dam at Lake Livingston for Rita and Lake Conroe. Lake Livingston was pretty significant. They were actually concerned they were going to lose the dam.
That would be awful.
Oh gosh, yeah, of course. It's one of those. It's one of those things. The emergency management world, we call it an incident within the incident. So you're dealing with, for Rita, we dealt with the evacuation, we dealt with the fringe of the hurricane, and then all of a sudden we might lose Lake Livingston Dam. And that was kind of after the storm had passed through. But yeah, there's all kinds of things that happen as these things come in.
Yeah, the Beaumont Port Arthur area, it would be next on my list. It just got a lot of nasty stuff in harm's way.
Yeah.
And bad things have happened with storms that have been eventful. Like Ike did a tremendous amount of flooding over there. But if you put a core of a storm up through there, you look on the historical tracks, none of the big boys have gone in somewhere between High Island and just west of Sabine Pass. I think that would do them in if they had. That would be a worse event than what they've had so far. They've had enough of it. I think they're actually, when I've done talks over there, from a little public kind of talk, is they're very aware of their issues because they've had so many storms that, and I think the local folks there in the meteorology world have convinced them that they haven't seen the worst that Mother Nature could throw at them.
Mm-hmm.
So, Bill, when you were at the National Hurricane Center director, when you were director from what years were you there?
08 through started.
Okay, so was Ike your big event at the Hurricane Center? Because you had left Houston, so you were the meteorologist in charge in Houston, so kind of the boss of the Houston Galveston office in Lake City, and then you went to be the director of National Hurricane Center. So Ike would have been first up, right? In that busy 2008 year, there was a lot going on that year.
Yeah, for me, Ike was the big storm. It's interesting for the rest of the people over there. They thought Irene was the big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. That
And
was a
Irene was northeast U.S., right?
it was a coast crawler that it went through an eyewall replacement cycle coming out the Bahamas, and everything indicated we'd probably have a Cat 4 grazing Cape Hatteras, and it never got a good eye again. But in spite of that, it did billions of dollars of damage, and then big flash floods in upstate New York and Vermont, but for me, Ike was by far the most eventful one.
Yeah.
What are your some of your takeaways from that storm while you were working there as the director?
The fun part was that the culture that was they're very reluctant to change, to put things out farther in advance, and I managed to coerce James Franklin to crank the watch out when the forecast offices wanted it. So we actually didn't follow our own rules. We cranked it out at like 60 hours. I don't know if that makes any difference. I'm not that convinced that the watch warning system is all that meaningful in hurricanes anymore, even though it is meaningful economically, because a lot of businesses won't shut down if there's not a warning. Some states have rules on when hurricane policies kick in and or don't. So there is reason for doing that. But let's see what else. I think I was surprised at how much of a run up tide in advance, largely due to the great size of the storm. You had a huge wind field all the way from its center out over the open Gulf up to the coastline there. So it was pushing a lot of water way ahead of it. And I think that caught everybody by surprise. And I think the storm surge gurus in the slosh world have figured out how to model that better now. It simply didn't I don't think it works in the model we had back then. So I think there were some improvements made on that.
So Bill, did Ike, or was it a storm after Ike? I thought it might have been Ike that really got the surge unit into looking at inundation and storm surge watch and warning and all that stuff. Or was that something else I'm thinking about?
Nope, it was Ike.
Okay.
I was raving about the fact that the stuff we had on storm surge didn't look any different than what we put out with storms like Carla and Beulah decades before that. And I said, we ought to be able to do better than that. And it was about that same time I had selected Jamie to take it over, and he had the grit to really push on it, because there was a lot of resistance initially to what we were trying to do there.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And not so much internally. Internally, everybody hell, the guys that wrote the white paper on doing it were the two of the most conservative in the office. Ed and James wrote a white paper on why we needed a storm surge warning to, in addition to what we already had out. So they were all inside. We were all okay with that. We had to convince states, the emergency management community, there was a better way to do this.
So what do you think about nowadays? You know, we kind of have this constant, every time we have a storm threat, this cone debate and impact debate, and impacts are outside the cone, and people seem to not be able to understand that. What do you think about all of that?
I think I'm glad I retired. No. The whole messaging thing was, I don't have a lot of sympathy for it. If the cone is so damn bad, why does everybody use it?
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Good price. It's a useful product. The trouble is the landfalling hurricane is far more too complex to handle in a one size does everything graphic. You can't do it. And people attempt to do that, and it just gets convoluted, and they don't know how to use it. Now, if you use that in conjunction with like impact graphics, and then you have to talk through it. Because inside the three of us would look at a map, know exactly what they're talking about with the impacts without a whole lot of explanation. But there's a lot of people in the public that are not map savvy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what drove the area to go to that zip zone way of evacuation zones from the OLA. No one knew what zone they were in. And you know, I say, yeah, it's easy. It's right here on the map. They looked at it. I said, where do you live? And they said, I don't know. And that really was an eye opener to me. I really didn't realize that map savviness is not a natural human instinct.
Mhm.
So anyway, I'm sure it can be improved on, but I'm not completely convinced. I think a dynamic cone to where you could figure out a way to manipulate it by the storm. For example, right now with Lee, I would think that even though they talk about the average error out there, I would think with the setting you've got and the size of the features that are driving it, that you would be more confident than average on the 5-day track you have out. So you see, you'd shrink the cone for that.
Yeah.
Of course, then that runs into the argument that people give that people misunderstand the narrow cone as it nears landfall is relative to the impact.
Mhm.
Yeah. And to your comment earlier about watches and warnings, the general public, really, most of them don't know the difference. And not just hurricanes, but tornadoes too. People ask me, or if I ask
Yeah,
them,
I think
they just don't know.
that's much more of a concern with tornadoes to me than it is with the hurricanes. Man, if people think the watch is the same thing as a warning, more power to them. That gives them more lead time to get things done.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's all a watch. Just, take shelter. Yeah. Yeah.
We've gotten good enough at most of these hazards that they're not going to come without warning. The tornadoes can cause you some problems if you don't get a signal on the radar, but certainly with the big winter storms or hurricanes, things like that, we do a good job of forecast. The improvements we're going to make on impact is going to be on the human side, not on the meteorological side. We're going to improve.
Yeah. Are we getting better at intensity forecasting, do you think, Bill?
Yeah, I think so. The data shows it, and the verification stats that NHC publishes every year, and the improvements in the hurricane models. I mean, they look kind of incremental if you look at them in a year time. But I step back and look at what we were getting from HWRF in 2011 compared to what we're getting from the hurricane models now, and it's night and day.
Yeah.
I have confidence that these forecasts are pretty good, and if you have confidence in the model, I mean, anything out past 24 hours, you're pretty much relying on the models anyway, because you don't have, unless you have some kind of secret sixth sense or something about eyewall replacements and shrinkage to pinhole eyeballs and stuff like that. I don't know any other way to do it other than through the models.
Right. So the debate, or whatever you want to call it, at the beginning of the hurricane season was, we're getting into El Nino. So what's going to have more of an influence, El Nino trade winds, or the sea surface temperatures being above normal? It looks like sea surface temperatures are winning out, if you want to call it a win. But
it actually looks exactly like Phil Klotzbach was talking about, that the extremely warm waters of the main development region and in the near subtropics we're gonna have a hell of a run the last month or so, the next month or so, out in the open Atlantic, of these waves coming off Africa. But the one of the features of an El Nino is a tendency for higher, stronger than normal ridge across northern Mexico and the western North America, and a stronger trough on the East Coast. And that is certainly looks like what we've been having. And as long as that setup is there, we got westerlies coming down into the Gulf. And every now and then one will sneak through, like Adelia did last week. But getting them this far west is a challenge, which is fine with me.
Yeah, absolutely. We can do well. We can use the rain, but we can do without the wind for sure. Yeah. So with the warmer water temperatures, do you think we're going to have a more active late October, November season this year?
My hunch is no. I think the the fully developed El Nino and the southward movement of the jet stream and all, you're going to end up with a much stronger wind shear intrusion of dry air down in across the Caribbean's where you see the most activity in the late part of the season. If that's where the dry air and the shear is going to be, I'd be surprised to see a lot of activity there. But then again, you know, who knows that you could if waves of consequence with enough moisture keep coming off Africa with that superheated water, we could keep developing out there longer than usual.
Yeah. Talk about your how your interest in weather developed. Was it from a childhood or later in life, or?
Yeah, my father liked to refer to it as the defective gene. I grew up in Delaware. Actually, I was born outside of Boston, and the day before I was born, on August 9th of 1949, my father took my 8-month pregnant mother to see the Red Sox play the Yankees in Fenway Park. The high that day was 100 degrees, and I was born the next day, and he swears it because he stressed out mom in the heat. And August 10th that day was the hottest day on record at the time in Boston. So that was my hello to the world thing. But anyway, growing up in Delaware, my fascination was snowstorms. And I was like 9 or 10 years old, and we had a 2-story house, and it'd be about midnight. It was snowstorms going on, and there'd been a little lightning in it. And I'm sitting there with the main door open, just staring out at the snowfall, and had the lights on and everything. My father would come down the stairs and he'd say, "Bill, go to bed. They're going to cancel school with all this snow going." I said, "Oh, I don't care about that. I'm going to watch it snow." Or I can imagine him going upstairs saying, "Betty, something's wrong with that kid. I don't know what the hell." And then what launched me into a career in it. I mean, I was a totally indifferent school kid. I'd much rather play and do sports and all that crap. But 1962, there was this what they called the Ash Wednesday nor'easter on the East Coast. Tremendous tides, and until Sandy, they were the records along the Delaware and Maryland coast. And my father ended up landing on jury duty in a federal case about guess what, whether it was wind or water that did all the damage out on the coast there. And he would come home from his day at the court there and regale me with stories about expert witnesses with these hand-drawn weather maps arguing their case. That's kind of what launched me towards going to school for weather.
And you were stationed down in Kingsville for a period of time, right?
Yeah, I went to A&M, graduated in 71. I won the draft lottery, which spurred me into being a grade student. My good grades landed me a job in the Navy as a weather officer. And I flew hurricanes for 2 years. The Navy did away with the hurricane hunters. I went to Iceland as a communications ops officer in a fleet weather facility, which they cut in half halfway through my tour there. So that job went away. And then they assigned me to run the weather office in Kingsville, which was my last assignment. I replaced a lieutenant commander, and I was a lieutenant JG, and I was replaced by a chief petty officer. So I was debating whether to stay in the Navy because they were going to offer me graduate school out at Monterey, which, you know, a free ride for grad school in a place like Monterey. How can you turn that down, right?
Right.
My boss, a Navy captain, said, "I know they're offering you this thing, but guess what? Vietnam's ending. We got to get rid of 1,000 Navy weather officers, and you haven't had a single career-enhancing job. Every one of your jobs has been done away with. They said, if you want to stay in the Navy, get out of weather and go to the grad school and be a ship driver or something. If you want to be a meteorologist, get out of the Navy." So I put in my papers and went back to grad school.
So after you were out of the Navy, how did you end up in Houston?
Okay, I went back to A&M, got my master's degree. Took a brief job up in our test and evaluation lab just to get my foot in the door. There were so many veterans being hired. Even having the veterans preference in a master's degree didn't make it easy to get in the door. San Antonio had a vacancy, so I ended up moving after a year to San Antonio, where I was a forecaster for 6 years. The Amelia floods and the 1980 heat wave are memorable events from that.
Oh, I remember the 80 heat wave. Yeah.
Then I got a lead forecaster job in Fort Worth, chasing tornadoes and hailstorms. And most notable thing about that 6 years was we didn't have to get a new roof while we lived there. That's kind of lucky in that environment. And
Were you there? Were you there in 1985
yes,
when the Delta aircraft?
Oh, yeah.
yeah. And I've been on what back then we flew these. I was like the aviation focal point at the forecast office. You fly these things called familiarization flights, where you'd ride in the cockpit and you'd talk weather with the air crew there. And I had literally just landed a couple hours before the Delta 191 crash.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
It was an ungodly thunderstorm, just huge.
Hmm.
August,
Yeah.
August 1st. I mean, that's, what, it was just big pulse severe.
Yeah. Microburst, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't have any detection equipment, didn't have the 88D, so it was, and the office was swarming with lawyers for the next week or two.
Hmm.
So you missed Alicia in 83 then here in Houston.
I did, yeah. That's when I went to Fort Worth, and in fact, there's a guy named Steve Harned. Have you guys ever run across that?
Hmm.
Steve was the MIC at the Alvin office during Alicia.
Mm.
Unbeknownst to you, we were in the Navy together, but unbeknownst to either of us, we had both put in for the Houston job and the lead forecaster job in Fort Worth. He happened to get the Houston job in 83, and I got the Fort Worth one. I still think I got the better end of the deal.
When you were at A&M, did you ever think about going into the Corps there, since you had an interest in the military?
Well, no, I didn't really, but I did go in initially, and my first set of exams were 4 Fs and a D. And,
Were any of them weather classes?
no, your freshman year, but they were important, like calculus and stuff like that.
Sure, yeah.
But my advisor was a Dr. Brundage, and in fact, all the faculty there were pretty much either World War II or Korean vets at the time, war vets. So, but he said, you can't do both study and be in the Corps. You got to pick and choose, And he says, if you get out now, I can talk to all your instructors on there, and I'll bet you they'll let you either retake the exams or weigh more heavily how you do the rest of the semester. Ended up with 3 A's and 2 B's.
Yeah, much improved.
That tended to happen at A&M from time to time.
Yeah.
I made a 12 on my first physics exam my freshman year.
Yeah. How are you feeling after that?
Well,
was meteorology still in the cards?
It was the whole, is this for you? The advisors, is meteorology for you? And I'm like, yes. And you wise up real quick, and you get rid of that class, and you go over to Blinn and take it and transfer it back over to A&M.
Yeah, I had fun with physics and chemistry at A&M.
The school system I was in Delaware was probably in the top 1% in the country. It was called the Alfred I. DuPont School District, and the DuPont company would put some of their scientists on sabbatical to teach courses in there. So all the basic courses that the chemistry, the physics, biology, the textbooks I had in my senior year in high school were the same ones I had as a freshman at A&M. It was kind of a do-over for my mediocrity in high school.
Yeah, but now you have to actually read them right in college.
Yeah. Well, I learned to study. Think about it. It was still basically all male.
Yeah.
It was a dry county. I didn't know what the hell a dry county was.
Fun times.
I learned very quickly what it was.
So the chicken didn't exist?
No. Chicken Ranch did, but the chicken didn't. But there was a bunch of shack-like liquor stores across the Brazos River on with Highway 60, I think it is, that goes over that way towards Snook. And it
Yeah,
was called Whiskey Bridge, and
yeah.
uh,
Spent a lot of time there, I'm sure.
well, the
On the
guys,
weekends, anyway.
the guys with a big car with a big trunk would be the runners and give them the money. And I didn't have a car, so I stayed there on weekends. And I learned to study because there weren't any distractions. You didn't have cable TV even. You had KBTX or zero as far as what to watch. I didn't have a TV. There was no point in it for that. And,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly the college experience it is today. Let's put it that way.
It is. It has changed a bit, even from when I was there in the '80s. It's changed quite a bit. So from there, how did you land the job as the director of the National Hurricane Center?
Yeah, it was there. They had me give talks at the AMS conference to the student section of it. And those are all the best and the brightest from the colleges. So the title of my talk would be "How the heck did a C+ high school student end up in the National Hurricane Center?" And yeah, so I go through the basics. Basically, the part of it's luck. I mean, when I was flying hurricanes, some of the key people I met were Neil Frank and Bob Simpson. And they noticed my interest in the hurricane part of it, and I kind of kept in touch with them over the years, and that got me to keeping in touch with the new people as they came along. And while MIC at Houston, Bob Sheets, Jerry Gerald, and Max all came over here, and I kept working with them and ended up being part of their what they called hurricane liaison team at the time. Even when I was director, we would augment a team that FEMA operated to do all the briefings out of the Hurricane Center. And I got to do Isabel, Charlie, and Katrina. It's an HLT. And that, I mean, the main reason I ended up with that job is they needed someone in there to clean up some management issues. And that, my 20 years of being a manager compared to anybody else that was putting in for it gave me the leg up on that. But having the recommendations of someone like Max and the experience of working all those storms, which I think got me in the door.
So Bill, when you were in Houston, how long?
15 years.
15 years. When you were here, what was your most memorable weather event?
As MIC, probably Allison. Rita is pretty close in there also, but for all the wrong reasons. We thought we were doing all the right things, and the evacuation was a total disaster. But Allison was quite the weather event back then. That was the first big tropical rain centered on an urban area. I mean, we had speculated what might happen in talking with people, but to have it actually unfold. Yeah, I can remember what I did that whole day, that Friday when the big rains hit. October 24 is in there too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you think of Allison, and a lot of us here in Houston went through Allison, myself included. Could you have imagined after Allison anything worse than Allison? Could you have imagined Harvey?
Yes, and I'll tell you why. In 1978, I was assigned to assist the service hydrologist at the San Antonio office for a little rain event. We were going to get out of this weak landfalling tropical storm. 2 days later, we had 48 inches of rain up over a ranch near Kerrville, and the flow at Comfort on the Guadalupe at that time at the gauge there was the same as the flow on the Mississippi going by St. Louis.
Oh, wow.
And the service hydrologist, he was an older guy, George Cush, and he'd seen plenty of big rain events. And he said, "You'll remember this because you'll never see an event like this again." 1 year later, I'm looking at the forecast desk and we have Claudette, 43 inches of rain in 24 hours in Alvin.
Alvin, yeah. Yeah.
I looked at George and I said, well, gonna see any more of these? And he just shrugged. And from that moment on, I said, this is the norm. And I got to looking at it. There's a whole lot of the older storms where we had some measurements up to 30 inches. I'm wondering if they may have been even more.
So, and I've seen some of the stuff you did because I think you sent it to me in some PowerPoint. So like you get some of the same upper level patterns that repeat and all that kind of stuff here in Texas and all that. But, and I guess there was some, I think back in the 1899 up around the Brazos River, there was a maybe a depression or something in June. I guess my question, if you look at Amelia and you look at Claudette, spatially you had very small but a lot very high totals, right? So, Alvin had 43 inches, Hobby Airport had 10, 11, 12 inches of rain. So when we talk about amounts versus spatial coverage of amounts, I mean, have you seen anything with what you've looked back in, maybe 1899 comes to mind for me, that would compare spatially to Harvey? So those big totals, but over a big area.
Now I don't know if the slides that Nielsen Gammon put together were in that set, but he showed very clearly that the aerial was just off the charts. There's none of the next one down wasn't half as much coverage.
Mhm.
And that's even if you pare it down to like the 20-inch isohyet.
Yeah.
Multiple days too. It's a big, strong hurricane that stalled near the coast, was able to regenerate. I mean, the big flooding, everybody talks about 52 inches of rain, but that first night, what was it? Maybe 20 to 30 inches of rain.
Yeah. I mean, we had some places that, between 20 and 30, and, a lot of it fell in 3-4 hours.
Right. And that's what caused all the flooding, not the 50 inches. That persisted. It made it linger much longer. Hell, I ran out of coffee at the house and couldn't get to a store. It was really a big crisis. So yeah, I mean that's such an unusual storm, in the not getting the same places whacked 3 days in a row like that was something else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it just made the slow crawl, and we just stayed on the dirty side of it during most of that crawl. So it just kept dumping and dumping. And Allison, I think, if I remember, just kind of spun around kind of over the downtown area, and it was a small storm, but like Claudette, a lot of rain in a small area.
Yeah, I mean, Allison was moving, albeit slowly, but it was moving south, and it had a strong inflow of very deep, unstable air, and it was Godzilla thunderstorms. We actually had some tornadoes before sunset up along the Harris-Montgomery County line.
Mhm.
Just to add to the fun, I ended up, Matt Moreland brought me in back to the office because I was going to come back in at 1 o'clock and send Steve Allen, another of the management team who was covering the evening, him off the hook then, because it sounded good to me. And I just finished mowing the yard, and Matt called, said, "We're getting tornadoes, and I have nobody else I can get in here. Can you get in just for an hour or two until we get past these tornadoes?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So there I am in my lawn mowing clothes, and I got home at 1 the next afternoon.
So Bill, I have a question. You bring up an interesting point because I've seen this happen now 3 times. One was with Allison. We had the heating, and we had some small tornadoes, and then we kind of went straight into this flash flood event. We did see the same thing with Harvey the afternoon, that Saturday afternoon. We got a little bit of sun, and we had a couple of tornadoes. One of the bigger ones was up in Northwest Harris County, the Cypress, Bridgeland area. And then we had the same thing again with Imelda. We had a little bit of heating. We had a couple of tornadoes in eastern Harris, Chambers County, and then we went straight into the flash flood event that unfolded with Imelda. And so, I guess my assumption is you get a little heating, you get more unstable, and it just kind of feeds these things. But has anybody looked into that's kind of a precursor, if you will, for these kind of heavy rain events with these tropical systems?
No, but they probably should. I don't know offhand, but intuitive. We kind of knew that intuitively as part of some stuff that my coworkers in San Antonio had worked up. The heating during the day, the peripheral bands of the decaying storm get very active, and they do their thing, and it stabilizes the outside. But the center part, the air starting to inflow there, and the warm, unstable air gets into the center on that, and at the same time that the deep layer moisture on top starts cooling off, which adds to the destabilizing. Plus, you have the outflow mechanism to explain the center part of the storm being the where the nocturnal activity goes. But as far as detailed study on that, I'm not aware of one.
Interesting.
And I'm sure there's just as many examples where nothing happens after the tornado. So that could be.
We don't have to bring that up.
Just to be fair.
Let's just say you got a theory, it needs to be explored. We need to spend a lot of money on it.
Yeah.
October 94 was a mixed bag of severe weather and heavy rain. A lot of people try to attribute that to the Pacific Hurricane Rosa, but I just don't get it. The upper core of Rosa was entering Wisconsin when the heavy rain was falling in southeast Texas.
Wow.
Yeah, that's hard to attribute that then.
Yeah, I attribute it to we had the subtle baroclinic zone, several standard deviation above normal high mid-level high parked over the eastern Gulf, and a deep channel, of air all the way from the Caribbean to almost saturated coming into southeast Texas, and that little boundary, that little baroclinic zone, is what kept it going.
It makes more sense.
Now there was something in I think it was October '98 down in the Hill Country when they had their big floods there, and I thought there was an East Pacific system that enhanced that maybe.
Yeah, that one
I
I
remember
think like the timing was right too, and some of the other ones I've looked at back in the 80s that went outside of the San Antonio area, but were interesting. That if you've got a frontal boundary that's is fairly active, and you bring one of those across there, the two working together ends up being a producer of really great rainfall rates for the further inland type floods you get out of the Pacific ones.
Well, I guess we should wrap up.
Yes, sir.
I told Bill, we'd be under an hour, so I want to keep my promise and respect your time, sir. Thank you so much, Bill, for joining us. Always a fascinating conversation to talk with you.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Thanks for inviting me. Let's do it again someday.
Yeah, absolutely.
That sounds good. All right. Until then, take care. Hit them straight.
Yeah. Well, when the temperature gets below 90, maybe I'll be back at it.
All right, Bill. Thanks again.
You bet. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.